Let me show you my 15 favorite seafoods that I ate in all of 2024, including some awesome king crab like this, also one of my personal favorites, soft shell crab, and you can't forget as well, grilled blue crabs too. So let's go ahead and get started. At number 15, it's going to be an oyster. And it's not just any oyster. This is actually a West Coast oyster, but it's not just the oyster that made it one of my favorite. It's what I put on top of it. And I never would have done this if it wasn't for everybody in my comments telling me I should give this combination a try. Now, the oyster I'm using is a Hog Island oyster. And like I said, it's a West Coast oyster that's kind of got a dry taste to it, a little bit of cucumber taste to it as well. And it has a good amount of brine as well. So I decided I was going to pair this after a lot of people suggested it with some kimchi. Now, this is premium oyster kimchi. I put a little bit of the kimchi on it itself and then some of the juice as well. This combination was absolutely delicious, and I use it all the time. The number 14 is going to be another oyster combination, and this is another West Coast, which is surprising to me because I got to admit, East Coast are my favorite, but when I look back through all my videos, every time I watch these two videos about these two combinations of oysters, my mouth literally watered. So the stuff I'm using right now is called Hogwash, and it's Hog Island Oysters personal sauce they use. And I would describe it as like a spicy mignonette. There's cilantro, there's jalapeno, and then of course it has like shallots and stuff like that that make it that traditional mignonette type of sauce. I think it really went well with this West Coast oyster, but I tried it on East Coast oysters as well. And it probably is now my favorite mignonette sauce by far to put on any oyster because it's like a mignonette sauce and a hot sauce had a baby. And in my opinion, that combination on an oyster cannot be beat. So if you're looking for a new sauce to try on an oyster, go on to hogisland.com and order some of this stuff right away. Number 13, we're moving on from oysters and we're getting to our first crab of the year. The crab that I chose for number 13 is going to be a king crab. Now, this is a gold king crab or a golden king crab, and I bought it from a store in Alaska. Now, it came already cooked and completely frozen, and I was kind of surprised by like how small it was actually. I thought these king crabs would be a lot bigger, but the meat was absolutely delicious, and it was really my first time ever eating like a whole king crab or a king crab that I knew was fresh from Alaska. So after I ate it though, I was really curious. I paid almost $400 for this crab right here, and I was curious how much meat I would get out of this huge crab, and I was shocked when I was done. I picked every single leg and even the body meat as well, and I didn't end up with nearly as much as I thought it would. Like I said, I spent $400 on this, and after I was done, that's all the meat that I got. I weighed it out and it was under 3/4 of a pound. I don't know if buying whole king crab is really the way to go, but it definitely tasted really good. Another one that I made this year is number 12, and this was just kind of thrown together. I had a whole bunch of leftover stuff from a kit that I got from the Real Oyster Cult. Basically, I threw it all on that smoked salmon and made like a smoked salmon roll up. In this salmon was some caviar, it had some salmon pate, it also had some crab meat, and of course, a freshly shucked raw oyster as well. Now, the comment section on this video was absolutely split. Some people thought it was a great idea. Other people thought it was a travesty and I never should have done it. I got to be totally honest, out of all the things that I've kind of made on a whim this year, this was one of my favorite. Like, I really couldn't believe how well all the flavors went together. And I really think that if it was on like a sushi roll and had some rice to kind of balance it out and wasn't so rich, this would be a really, really good roll that people would pay big money for. Next up at number 11, it's going to be another crab, and this is a barradie crab. So this crab is considered a snow crab, but it's a subset of snow crab that they call barradie crab. This is from Alaska, and what I noticed right away is these were way bigger than the snow crab legs I normally get. I was really impressed with the meat that was on the knuckles and also the meat that was in these legs. I mean, just look at this leg pull right here. There was tons of meat in each one of these barradie crab legs. They were frozen. I could tell that they were pretty fresh when they were frozen, and they tasted absolutely delicious. Out of any snow crab, this was by far my favorite, and I would definitely order them again. Now, normally I just taste the crab, but this time I decided I would give in to everyone telling me I should use some butter on it. So I used some of the seasoning that they included with this crab leg and mixed it up with some butter, dropped it in there, and I gotta say it was good, but I don't think you need to put butter on a sweet crab leg like this. It can be delicious just how it is. Number 10 is going to be a crab that I never heard of before, but I was excited to give it a try when eFish told me they had some of it. This is a Kona crab, also known as a spanner crab in Australia, and from what I understand, it's like a deep water crab. Now, the name spanner crab comes from the fact that their claws right there actually look like a wrench. And in Australia, I guess they call wrenches spanners. So that's why it's called a spanner crab. Now, as far as the flavor, I was told it's kind of like sweet and a little bit flaky too. When I heard that, I thought this might taste really close to blue crab, which is one of my favorite crabs to eat. When I tasted the claw, I gotta say, it did taste really similar to a blue crab claw, and I was excited to try the body. Now, inside this crab was odd. Like, I've never seen a crab body shaped like this, and it was really hard to get the top shell off. I used a pair of pliers to kind of leverage it off first, and then was able to get everything open. And you can see the meat's just kind of packed on the side. It almost looked like a lobster tail, but with like different compartments in it. I got some of the meat, which was light, flaky, and it was sweet. And out of all the crabs I've tried so far, this one tasted the closest to a Maryland blue crab. Up next was another item from E-Fish, and this is actually a California spiny lobster. Now, I've had Florida spiny lobster, and I've also had the classic New England or Atlantic lobster, whatever you want to call it, and even European blue lobster, but this was the first time I've ever tried a lobster from California. I cooked it just the way I would any other lobster, steamed for about 13 minutes or so, and then went ahead and started going into it. I started with one of the legs, and I was really surprised by how much meat was inside that leg, and I gave it a taste, and this was a really good piece of lobster. I was surprised. Next, I moved right to the money, which is the tail, and this tail was full of meat, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Honestly, Florida spiny lobster aren't my favorite. I don't find them as sweet as like a Maine lobster, and after deveining it, I gave it a taste, and I gotta say, this is right up there with like Maine lobster to me. I really enjoyed it. Next up is a Jonah crab. A lot of people think these are trash crabs. People in Maine that crab and fish and stuff like that actually throw these out when they catch them instead of keeping them to eat, but I was curious why. So the first thing I tried was the claw, and I was surprised to say that these reminded me a lot of stone crab claws. They were definitely hard to open like a stone crab claw, and I was curious to see if the meat was going to taste exactly the same. I got one open. The meat pool looked really good. I gave it a taste, and look, this is a close second to a stone crab claw, and honestly, a fraction of the price of stone crab claws. This is worth a try. Now, going inside the body, I see why there's not a big market for them. There's really not much meat inside the Jonah crab itself. Besides the claw, I don't really know what you're gonna, enjoy out of one of these crabs. I did get a little bit of the body meat, and it was fine, but the claw was definitely the highlight of the whole crab for me. Number 7 is not that chicken thigh that I'm baiting these crab pots up with. It's the crabs that are inside the crab pots. These are Maryland blue crabs, and I absolutely love them. But one of my things I did this year was try some new ways to cook them. And I decided I was going to go ahead and grill some. Now, to grill them, you want to cool them down and then peel the top shell off and clean out all the inside guts and stuff like that. For this one, I used a little bit of JO blackening season, and then of course some hot sauce and butter that I basted all over top the crabs, and I put them on the grill at about 325 degrees, and I had them cook for around 10 minutes or so. When I say these turned out absolutely amazing, I cannot understate how surprised I was how good they tasted. Breaking into one, you can just see how juicy the meat was, and while it's not as good as a steamed Maryland blue crab, this was one of my favorite ways to eat these blue crabs this year. For number 6, we're going back to a shellfish. And the shellfish I'm talking about, you don't eat the whole thing, you just eat the adductor muscle. This is a scallop, and the reason why we only eat adductor muscles instead of the whole scallop in the United States is because most of our shellfish or our scallops come from Massachusetts or Maine, and there's a pretty good possibility that the rest of the scallop actually has PSP or paralytic shellfish poisoning, and it's just not worth taking that risk if it does. So for these scallops, I salt and peppered each side and then put them in a hot pan and cooked them for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes on one side, and then just briefly cooked them on the other side. You know they're done when they have a nice little sear like that on them, and you don't want to overdo them because they'll get too chewy. These ones were absolutely perfect. It was like kind of biting into butter almost. It tasted so decadent and delicious. I definitely forgot how good scallops actually are. Now for number 5, I'm sticking with scallops again. After having those scallops that were already shucked on the boat, I decided I wanted to give true live scallops a try. And so when you get live scallops, they're in the shell like this, and you need to use a knife to kind of release the adductor muscle from the shell. I used a fillet knife, and in hindsight, I probably should have used something else, but I was able to get the scallop out of there and clean everything out around it. I was surprised to find this little fish in there, but I guess it's good luck when you find it, and some people even eat it. Now, I shucked a few of these shells that I had here, got the scallop out of it, and after a while, I got pretty good at it, but I don't know if it was worth all the work. So I was excited to cook them up and give them a try. I cooked them the same way I cooked the other scallops I had, just a little bit of salt and pepper, some avocado oil, and cooking them high and hot really, really quickly. Flip them over really quick and don't let them cook too much on the other side because it will make them chewy. I gave these a taste, and I gotta say, it's a close tie with number six, but they are a little bit better than the ones that I tried in the last one, and that's why they're number five. Now it's time for the top four favorite seafoods I had this year, and this is where it got tough. And number four is gonna be king crab. Now I've had different king crabs on this video and just like in general, but this is the first time I ever got colossal king crabs. I got 20 pounds of them to do a whole bunch of different recipes, but the first time I tried one of these, I just kept it simple. I did a little bit of king crab, a little bit of butter, and just dipped the different pieces of the king crab in it. Now this is the knuckle, and the meat that's on the knuckle of these huge king crab legs is just unreal. And it's super sweet and not salty at all. But this is what I was here for, this big, huge king crab leg. And this meat pool was absolutely perfect. I mean, look at that piece of king crab. I dipped it in a little bit of the butter and gave it a taste. Look, this was absolutely delicious. I can't even explain what this tasted like. It was sweet, it was succulent. The little bit of lemon juice just really set it over the top. I know it's hard to believe that this isn't my number one, but the other ones, I swear, are going to be even better. Number three is going to be a king crab California roll. Now, I do love Asian foods, especially sushi and other things like that. And so when I got these king crab legs, I knew I needed to do something special with them. I went ahead and made a California roll with one of those huge legs of king crab. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty surprised I was able to actually get this roll all together. And when I cut it in the middle, I was surprised by this cross section. I mean, check out how much crab is inside this roll. Now for the topping, I used a little bit of the knuckle meat and added some sriracha mayo to it to kind of make like a crab salad. Put that on top of those rolls and then put on top of that some crispy onions. Look, when I say this was delicious, it's an understatement. As I'm making this video, I'm thinking about what I'm gonna have for dinner, and I'm pretty sure that this is gonna be it. Now the next two, number two and number one, may come as a surprise to some of you, but number two is actually going to be a blue crab. Now it's not just any kind of blue crab, it's going to be a soft shell blue crab. I have a really, really, really nostalgic place in my heart for crabs like this. I think it's one of the best ways to eat blue crabs. And after you clean the face, cut off the mouth parts, cut out the lungs and all that kind of stuff, or the gills, sorry, you're gonna have a ready to eat crab. Now you can deep fry these. I just pan fried it with a little bit of breading on top of it. You don't need to make it like overly breaded because you want the flavors of the soft shell crab really to stand out. Now while you're cooking this, you gotta be careful because there is water trapped inside this soft shell crab. It can kind of pop and explode and you might get a little grease splattered all over you. Now the first part that I always try is the claw, and that claw was absolutely perfect. Now cutting into it, you eat everything that's on the inside of the crab. All those guts, all that meat, everything is edible. And I gotta say, I know it doesn't look appetizing to some, but it is one of my favorite bites in all of seafood. And that takes me to number one. It's gonna be a soft shell crab again. But this year, a lot of people asked me to try a certain sauce that I thought was the perfect pair for a soft shell crab. So I prepared this crab just the same way I did the other one, except I didn't put any breading on it. And what I made to go with this soft shell crab was geo sum. Now, geo sum is a dipping sauce that's kind of like spicy and a little bit of sweet and also tangy from the fish sauce that I think is absolutely delicious. You got to add a little MSG to it as well, and here goes in the fish sauce too. You mix it all up, and I prefer to let it sit for a little bit, maybe about an hour or two, so those ingredients really incorporate, and then just dip the soft shell in there. The claw was really good in the geo sum, but what really stood out to me was actually when I cut the soft shell crab in half and dipped the body in it. The mixture of all the fat and the richness of that soft shell crab plus the geo sum was absolutely my favorite bite I had this year.